Could be just 24 hours away from a vote on the sweeping 1,200-page bill that would reform the nation's immigration policies. A bill that a number of senators admit they have not even bothered to read. Well, in the last 72 hours, we're seeing some eye-opening items in this bill that you may not be aware of, including $1.5 billion of yours on a temporary jobs program for low-income youth, financial aid for Alaska seafood processors, and $100 million to promote the U.S. as a travel destination. Oh, and the list goes on. Joining me now, Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Senator, it's not just that. There's also a measure that would make it easier for resorts to hire foreign ski and snowboard instructors, because this is what is first and foremost on the minds of the American people. The U.S. Senate is on it. Your thoughts?
Well, Megyn, you apparently haven't been listening. Didn't you hear Nancy Pelosi? She said that you can find out about these things after we pass them. You can read about them after we pass them. That is an insult to American taxpayers that we rush through so rapidly that nobody can really tell for certain what's in a bill. We've also discovered in the bill, as we're still working our way through it, that there's going to be an incentive to hire undocumented workers as opposed to American citizens, because you won't have to pay them for Obamacare. They don't get Obamacare, so it's going to be cheaper to hire an undocumented worker than it is going to be to hire an American citizen, and that's going to be the law. The $1.5 billion earmarked for some youth program or jobs program is equal to what we're going to spend on the fence, but the new amendment also has a veto power, so the president can veto the fence if he thinks the border is secure, which apparently the president already thinks the border is secure. So there's a lot of problems in this bill.
There's still a lot of controversial items, and as you tick them off, that becomes apparent. And so the question I have for you, Senator, is why the fire drill? Why does this have to get done before the July 4th recess, in Harry Reid's view? And why is it so imperative that we have this vote now tomorrow before people have even had the chance to read it?
And also, why is it such a hurry that we can't have amendments to the bill? I have an amendment to guarantee that if you are an undocumented worker, that you don't get welfare, that the states have to check to see if you're a documented or undocumented worker before you apply for welfare or when you apply for welfare. I have a similar amendment for voting that says that if you want to vote, you have to have proof of citizenship, and they need to check it. They can't just have you check a box. So these would be safeguards to make sure that the vote is safe and that welfare is safe from giving it to undocumented workers. Neither one of those amendments will get a vote in all likelihood.
It's going to pass. They say it's going to pass with flying colors in the Senate. They're predicting 68, maybe more votes on it, and they say that's going to give it the momentum it needs to pass in the House. Do you dispute that?
Well, I would disagree in the House. I think it's dead on arrival in the House. I think the House is closer to the position where I am, and this is where a lot of conservatives are. I'm for immigration reform, but border security should be first, and immigration reform should be dependent upon proving border security. If that happens, I'm all for it, and I can be for a lot that's in the bill, but you have to prove to me that you can and will secure the border before we progress on with the immigration reform.
Let me switch gears with you and ask you about the NSA leaker story, because we set out earlier and said, China, we're very unhappy with you because we told you not to release him and you did it. Now, Russia, you better not do the same thing. You bet if you release him to anybody, we want you to extradite him back to the United States. And Russia came out yesterday, Mr. Putin, and said, no. Then today, the United States dialed back its rhetoric and sort of started to say, instead of making scary threats about what we're going to do to you, Russia, if you don't extradite him back to the United States, we're kind of saying, please, would you pretty please just do it, please? Your thoughts on it?
You know, I think there's a very important issue above and beyond the leaker, and that's about privacy. And I've made several comments that I think it is important that we have an expectation of privacy and that our government not be able to willy-nilly look through billions of phone calls every day. And I think the court needs to take this up, and I'm challenging it in court. How the leaker will be judged, I think, still yet to be determined. I've advised that history will treat him better if he doesn't appear to be cozying up to countries that appear, or at least many believe, to be our enemies. And so I think it is important what happens, and I think if he's divulging information to foreign governments, history's not going to treat him well.
But this is a different question about, our relations with Russia and our tactics in handling this matter.
Yeah, I don't think we have any power. We don't have an extradition treaty, and I think our relations aren't good enough that either China or Russia will. There's a lot of back and forth over who's hacking whom and what countries are hacking into another country's computers. And my guess is that there's a little bit of hacking going on all sides. And I think that makes people less likely to turn over someone who's divulging or may have divulged information that has to do with one country hacking into another country's computers.
Let me ask you about the gay marriage rulings this morning out of the U.S. Supreme Court, because I know you went on Glenn Beck's show this morning, radio show, and you made a comment that you're going to take some flack for, which was he was saying this is going to lead to, the legalization of polygamy potentially and other, situations. And you came out and said, and I quote, "I think this is a conundrum. If we have no laws on this, people take it to one extension further. Does it have to be humans?" Do you want to comment on that, Senator?
Well, I think my point that I was trying to make is that government has been involved in marriage for a while, and it's been at the state level. And I think if we leave it at the state level, there will be room to disagree, but it will probably be within certain parameters. Like I said, I don't think it will be with multiple humans, and I think it will be human and human. And so I didn't mean that to mean anything other than that I think the government will still probably be involved in defining marriage to a certain aspect. I don't think we're going on towards polygamy or things beyond that. But I do think that our country is divided on the issue, and that in some ways the Supreme Court decision is probably going to allow us to agree to disagree. Some states like New York may go forward with gay marriage and have. Some states in the South probably won't, and not even in the foreseeable future. So I think we can agree to disagree, and that's kind of what our founding fathers talked about when they talked about federalism, that each state would sort of be an incubator of its own ideas and would be given the freedom to have disparate laws to a certain degree.
And your thoughts yesterday on the decision from the U.S. Supreme Court on the Voting Rights Act, suggesting or stating that we're past the point now where you have to subject these 9 states to the approval of Eric Holder and a 3-judge court who will tell these states whether they can change their voting laws or not. Some on the left, many on the left, have called this disgraceful. Jesse Jackson called it Confederate. And I know you've been a critic in the past, to some extent, of this body of laws. So your thoughts on what the Supreme Court did yesterday on it?
I think the 14th Amendment does allow for the federal government to be involved to make sure that there are no laws and no states are preventing people from voting. And there was a time in our country, an ugly past, when this happened. So there was every reason in the world for the federal government to be involved, and it's justified through the 14th Amendment. That being said, now in the last election, African Americans voted at a higher percentage than white Americans in 5 of the 6 states in question. I really think we should try to get to a point in time in our country where race, a person's color of their skin, is not part of the body of law. As long as no state is discriminating, that really we should try to have laws that are equal and the same for everyone, not special scrutiny, not no scrutiny, but just saying that if any state passes laws that have a racial bias to them, then there should be an ability for the government to investigate it. For example, I think right now our sentencing for people for nonviolent crimes with marijuana disproportionately affect black individuals, and I think there is a racial bias in our law that needs to be corrected. I'm actually working on that. So I do believe the federal government has a role, but it looks like in voting we're actually have been going in the right direction for some time now.
Senator Rand Paul, great to see you. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you.